My name is Richard Lingner, and I have been working at the Asian Civilisations Museum here for a little over 10 years. I started in 2011. Before that, I was a curator at a museum in Boston. The Asian Civilisations Museum came in here in 2003, but the building was built completed in 1867. It was originally meant to be a courthouse, but very quickly it became what they called government offices. So lots of different colonial offices of the government were in this building for a long time. I think it's much more of a comprehensive museum, and it has almost, well, not all aspects of Asian art, but a lot of them. Whereas some of the other museums are much more focused. We're standing here in the Ancient Religions Gallery, which is actually a two-part gallery. The gallery over there is slightly older material, and this is a little bit more modern stuff. And this particular object, which I picked as one of my favorites, is one of the youngest objects in the museum. This was painted in 1959 and 1960. And it's actually a 31-meter long scroll painted on sections of cloth and then sewn together. And the cool thing about it is that we have it mounted on rollers. So about every year or so, we change the image, partly because we want people to be able to see different parts of the scroll, and then also partly because, you know, this is paint on cloth, so it's light sensitive, so we want to protect it. And this scroll is the story of the Vessantara Jataka. The Jatakas are a collection of stories of the Buddha's previous lives. There are 537 of these stories, and this is the last one before he becomes the Buddha. And the last 10 or so talk about how he became the Buddha, how he achieved these virtues. And this scroll was actually made to be used in a ceremony that happens about every year in different times of year in the Thai Lao areas. I just love the materiality of it. You know, you can tell that it's been used, right? The paint is chipping off. The clocks, they probably had different ways of having the numbers on. Most of them have fallen off now. The blackboard is, you know, shiny in the parts where it was erased over and over again. And so the chalk is like, made it a nice black sheen in parts of it. And this part on the right with the prayer times in Arabic, you know, they didn't change that very often. So that's, you know, more how the blackboard probably looked originally. It's also a concrete example of the way I like to think about a lot of museum objects. They have one life outside the museum. You know, this is a prayer chart used in a mosque, used every day. But then once it comes to the museum, it's sort of frozen in time, right? So in 1995, in my way of thinking, this became an art object. This is another object that you could tell stories with, right? About the history of Borneo. The fact that the Dayaks would make a sculpture of a Dutch soldier, what does that tell you? And use it as sort of this protective figure in their fields, maybe, or in their village. I guess talks about the complicated relationship that they might have had with the colonialists. It's quite detailed too, because some people, you know, say that the boots are what the Dutch wore, and he even has a pocket watch. Is one of these darkware bowls made in around the 12th or 13th century in China, and it's the one in the middle of the three smaller bowls. And the reason I love it is because the decoration on it, on the inside, was made by putting you know, covering the bare clay with a glaze as usual, which you usually do when you color ceramics, and then putting sprigs of, I don't know what it is, pine or some sort of a plant in there. And then you put it in the kiln, in the, you know, the hot firing to solidify the ceramic. And the plant material burns away. And because it was there blocking the glaze, it creates an area where there's no glaze. So it's a sort of what they call resist decoration. And I just love the fact that they were doing that back in the 12th century. Now we're standing in the Maritime Trade Gallery, which is full of objects mostly made in Asia that were traded around the world, a lot to the Western world, a lot to different countries in Asia. The last favorite object I pick is this 6-volume Chinese-English dictionary. The title of the book is The Chinese and English Instructor, and it was published in 1862. And it basically tells Chinese businessmen, you know, it helps Chinese businessmen interact with foreigners in English. The page that is opened here in one of the 6 volumes, place names with Chinese characters and then in English. And so it was written by a Chinese man who, at the age of 10, went to Hong Kong to study English at a missionary school. And then he worked as a translator in the courts, and then eventually got into a trading house where he was a translator. And then he became what was called a comprador, which is a sort of an agent who puts together, you know, the foreigners who come to buy Chinese stuff with the Chinese merchants. And he worked for a very famous trading company, Jardine and Matheson. And so basically this guy wrote this book to help other people like him who in the same business, because he learned English very early, obviously, and it was said that he spoke like a Briton. This is basically his sort of giving back, I guess.